He didn't even knock, just slid the eviction notice under my bedroom door like a hotel receipt. My name printed neatly, my son's signature at the bottom. I stared at the edge of the paper for a long time, pretending I hadn't seen it, hoping if I didn't move, if I didn't breathe, the truth might curl up and die like a spider in the light. But the paper didn't vanish, and neither did the echo of her laugh from downstairs. The hallway was quiet, too quiet for a home that once smelled like cinnamon and held the sound of his childhood laughter. I picked up the notice. My hands trembled, but not from age. No, this was the kind of shaking that happens when you realize a place you nurtured has turned against you. I opened the door, slow, careful. From the top of the stairs, I could see them in the kitchen. She was leaning on the counter like she owned it, like she'd always belonged here. He was stirring his coffee, eyes fixed on the tile, saying nothing. My mouth opened, then closed. I was afraid my voice would crack like old wood. Instead, I stepped back, closed my door, and sat on the edge of the bed I'd bought secondhand the year I stopped sleeping in the master, the year he brought her home. The eviction notice said I had 30 days, but I knew the truth. I had already been gone for years, fading out of rooms they pretended to invite me into. My toothbrush moved from the bathroom to a drawer. My food preferences stopped showing up on grocery lists. One day, my bedroom door started staying closed, not by me, but by them. I ran my hand across the dresser top over the framed photo of the two of us when he was 10. He was missing a front tooth. I was missing sleep. We were happy then, or something like it. Downstairs, a cabinet slammed. She was always careless with sound. Even her footsteps had arrogance. I imagined her barefoot toes painted standing in my kitchen, her kitchen now pouring oat milk into my cup, the one with the faded sunflowers. He used to say, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." I wonder when I stopped being that to him. Was it when I forgot his girlfriend's birthday? When I fell asleep during one of her long-winded stories? Or was it simpler than that when I stopped being useful? The notice had no warmth, no apology, just cold legality, as if a lawyer, not a son, had decided my fate. I pressed the paper flat on my lap, smoothing it like a sheet on a hospital bed. I didn't cry. Not right then. Not even later when I overheard her say she'll land on her feet. She always does. The confidence in her voice was offensive, as if I were some stray cat who should be grateful for the boot. At dinner, they didn't mention it. Chicken overcooked. Broccoli steamed until gray. They asked if I'd seen the news. She joked about a coworker's outfit. My son nodded like nothing was amiss. I excused myself halfway through the meal. In the bathroom, I looked in the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. That scared me most. In the morning, my key no longer worked on the downstairs storage closet. That was where I kept the photo albums, my winter coats, and the quilt my mother had made. It was hers now. Everything that had mattered was locked away behind a door that no longer recognized me. Later that week, a moving truck came, not for me. For furniture she said didn't match the aesthetic. I watched from the window as two strangers carried out the armchair I used to rock him in. She laughed about the dust. He didn't even look up. 30 days. But the grieving had started long before that. The first time I felt it, that terrible aching kind of love, was when he was placed in my arms. His body slick and wrinkled, fists clenched like he was already bracing for life. I remember thinking, I will never let the world hurt you. That was before I knew the world would speak through him. I was 26. His father had vanished before the second ultrasound. I still remember the look on the nurse's face when she said, "Are you sure you want to keep it?" As if he were an accident I hadn't noticed. I kept him. Of course I did. I worked nights at a diner grading English essays during slow shifts, catching sleep in the empty back booth when the manager was kind enough to look away. I passed up a research grant at Columbia when he got pneumonia in kindergarten. They said they'd defer the offer. They didn't. But he got better. That was enough. We used to share everything, not just meals or space, but breath. I could feel when he was sad before he said a word. He had a way of sitting on the floor when something had gone wrong, legs crossed, head bowed like a monk in miniature. I'd make grilled cheese and listen until the storm passed. He was 16 when he met her, brought her over one afternoon with that panicked gleam of someone asking for permission without asking. She barely spoke, hair tangled, lips chapped. I made extra soup. I didn't ask questions. I gave her the spare room. She said she'd stay a week. She stayed 7 years. In the beginning, she was polite, quiet, even grateful. I'd hear her humming sometimes when she did dishes. I bought her shampoo, towels, even tampons, never asked for a cent. She started calling me Mama T, which made my heart split open in a way I didn't know was still possible. She worked odd jobs, dog walking, hostessing retail. She was never still. My son followed her everywhere, a satellite orbiting her moods. He started using words I didn't recognize, manifesting trauma bonds, boundary violations. Sometimes when they thought I was asleep, I'd hear them talking about therapy, about healing. I wanted to believe it. I remember one morning, a Tuesday, I woke up to find her crying in the kitchen. She'd burned the eggs. That was it. Just a pan of ruined eggs. My son held her murmuring nonsense, and I stood there invisible with the coffee I'd brewed for them. That's when the shift began, slow, almost elegant in its cruelty. I started cooking earlier, hoping to sit down with them. They began eating out. I'd suggest a movie. They'd already seen it. My son's room once, a place where we'd read poetry or argue about books, now had a lock. He gave her the car when I asked if we could share it. Said it made more sense logistically. I used to keep a journal. Somewhere around year 4 of her stay, I stopped writing. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. What was left to record, I was disappearing one kindness at a time. And still, I held on. When his father died, I handled the arrangements. Alone. He didn't come to the service. Said it was too complicated. She said it would be triggering. I mailed them the death certificate. They never replied. But I kept making dinner, kept folding laundry, kept waiting for the door to open and for him to say, "Thanks, Mom." Instead, she started calling me by my first name. That was the deepest cut. Not the eviction, not the silence, but hearing my name, my actual name on her tongue, like I was a tenant, a roommate, a burden. I remember sitting in my room one night, staring at the closed door, listening to the two of them laugh over some show. I laughed too. Quietly. Not because anything was funny, but because I realized I'd done all this to myself. Love, I had believed, would be enough. It started with the smallest things, things you could dismiss if you wanted to. An unwashed plate, a forgotten thank you, a door closed just a little too hard. But I had lived long enough to know that fractures begin as hairline cracks. She stopped thanking me first. Just set her dishes in the sink like I was the help. My son followed. His gratitude thinned, then vanished entirely. Meals became transactions. I cooked, they ate, the silence in between louder than any argument we'd never had. One night I came down early hoping to catch them. I'd made chicken marsala his favorite. It sat cooling on the stove while their car idled in the driveway. I watched them from the window. They were in the front seat, lit blue by the dashboard glow. She was laughing. He wasn't. But he didn't move away when she touched his face. They came in an hour later. No mention of the food. No glance in my direction. He went upstairs. She scrolled her phone on the couch, shoes kicked off like she owned the place. The next morning, the marsala was gone. Pan rinsed but not washed. No note, no leftovers saved. Just the faint smell of garlic and the feeling of being ghosted in your own home. He used to hug me every morning, a ritual, even through high school, college breaks, first jobs. A simple squeeze, warm and brief enough to say, "I see you." Now he barely nodded. One morning I reached out. He flinched. "Mom, don't," he said. I blinked. Don't what he looked past me. Just, not now. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. After that, I learned to keep my distance. I'd hear her in the hallway telling him I was stifling him, that I needed boundaries, that I wasn't his responsibility. And he listened. It wasn't immediate. He didn't flip like a switch. It was more like dusk, gradual, beautiful, even if you didn't know what was being lost. He started correcting me, interrupting. If I mentioned a memory, she'd fact-check it. If I said I missed him, she'd say I was manipulating. Once I found a photo on the mantel turned face down. It was of us, him on my shoulders, both of us laughing, wind in our hair. I turned it back. The next day it was gone. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. I'd find notes on the fridge with grocery lists I hadn't written. My laundry folded in styles I'd never used. My scent replaced by lavender hers. I asked him once gently why he seemed distant. He sighed. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said. But he didn't. He walked out the front door and drove away. That was the day I stopped asking. Instead, I started documenting. Not because I was planning anything, but because I needed to remember who I had been, who we had been. I opened an old journal and wrote Tuesday he didn't speak to me. Chicken gone, dishwasher running, smelled like her again. I read books about gaslighting, about emotional erosion, about narcissistic triangulation. The words were academic cold, but they matched the warmth I had lost. She was clever, always just nice enough in public, always just friendly enough in front of guests. But behind closed doors, her mouth tightened when I entered. Her voice rose when I disagreed. And he let her. That's what killed me. Not her ambition, not her takeover, but his permission. There's a particular kind of heartbreak that comes from watching someone rewrite the story you built together. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It makes you question everything. I started eating in my room. He never asked why. I got a library card, read late into the night, turned pages instead of pressing my ear against the wall, and slowly I began to see the truth. It wasn't that they didn't love me anymore. It was that I had become inconvenient. Love had become conditional, useful only when needed, invisible otherwise. And once I saw it, really saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The moment it all crystallized wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no shattered plates, no confession scrawled in lipstick on a mirror. It was a Tuesday, gray, unremarkable. I had just come back from the pharmacy arthritis cream vitamins, the cheap cookies he used to love as a boy. I set the bag on the counter. They weren't home. The silence felt different, not empty, but occupied by something I hadn't named yet. I put the kettle on. That's when I heard it. Her voice sharp and low, floating from the living room. I froze. She was on the phone. I couldn't hear the other voice, but hers was clear, practiced. Yes, the house is already in our names. She won't contest it. She's too proud, too. Old-fashioned. No 30 days is enough. Trust me, she'll leave quietly. He won't push back. Guilt still runs him. The water boiled over, hissing. She didn't hear. I turned off the stove, heart pounding. When she hung up, I stayed still, breath shallow. I needed to confirm. I needed truth. Not just suspicion, not just the ache of vanishing. I went to the drawer where we kept the files. The key was gone. I checked the backup behind the laundry detergent. Still there. I unlocked the cabinet, fingers trembling. There it was. The deed. The names. His. Hers. No mention of me. Date of transfer nearly 2 years ago. I sat on the floor. Concrete. Cold. A laugh escaped my throat, quiet, bitter. I had still been buying groceries then, still wrapping Christmas gifts, still calling him baby under my breath. I didn't remember signing anything. I hadn't. She had worked quickly, efficiently. Whatever gaps existed in the legal structure, she had filled with charm, with presence, with just enough daylight to blind him. I pulled the old lease agreement from the back of the drawer, the one from when I first bought this house. My name, my signature, my deposit. I laid the 2 papers side by side. Then I made a list. Line 1, I was never consulted. Line 2, he knew. Line 3, he let it happen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took the kettle off the stove and poured a cup of tea, hands steady now. Jasmine, my favorite. She hated it. The sound of their car pulling into the driveway didn't startle me. The front door opened. I heard her heels, his voice, their laughter. I stayed seated, looking at the papers. They passed the kitchen. She paused. Hey, you okay? I looked up. Smile, small voice, calm. Never better. She hesitated, tilted her head, smiled. But I could see it now, not the smile, not the angle of her jaw, not the expensive dye job. I saw the strategy, the cold calculation of a woman who knew exactly how to slip into someone else's life and wear it like skin. That night, I pulled out every journal, every receipt, every email. I built a paper trail. Not for them, for me, to reclaim the narrative. In bed, I listened to them talk about future plans. a baby maybe, travel, investment properties. The next morning, I booked an appointment with a lawyer. Not to fight. I was past that. I just wanted someone to witness it, to see what had been taken. He looked at the documents and sighed. You could contest this. Depending on the details, even file a civil claim. I shook my head. I won't, but I need you to know it happened. He nodded, and for a moment, I felt real. Seen. On the way home, I stopped by the hardware store, bought a lockbox, put my documents in, placed it under my bed. That was the night I slept through. Not because things were better, but because they were clear. I waited 4 more days, not out of fear, out of choice. I wanted the moment to be mine, not a reaction, not a trap. I cleaned the kitchen, folded every piece of laundry, watered the ferns in the sunroom she always forgot. Then I made tea. Jasmine, of course. 3 cups. They came home late. Laughter first, then silence when they saw me sitting at the table. The papers were stacked neatly beside the kettle. She was the first to speak. Something wrong, I gestured to the chairs. Sit. He moved before she did. She hovered, then followed, her body tense like a cat poised to flee. I poured the tea. No one touched it. I looked at him first. Not angry, not pleading, just clear. I found the deed. His eyes dropped, not to the table, to his hands. I was going to tell you, he said, voice small. When I asked. She leaned forward. This isn't what you think. I raised a hand. Not loud, not theatrical, just firm. Let me speak. She sat back, eyes narrowing. I turned to him again. You transferred the house. My house. The one I bought. The one I raised you in. He opened his mouth. I continued. I don't care about the paperwork. Not really. I care that you did it while I was still folding your laundry, still setting the table for 3. He blinked. No tears, just confusion. Like a boy who'd been caught cheating on a test and didn't understand the rules. I would have given it to you, I said, softer now. All of it. I would have signed it over without question, because that's what mothers do. But you took it like I was dead. Silence. Then her. We thought it would be better for taxes. It was a strategic move. I turned to her. Don't use my language to dress your theft. She stiffened. You're being dramatic. I stood. Not fast. Just enough. You've confused silence for consent, and kindness for stupidity. He flinched at that. I walked to the sink, poured out my tea. Let the water run. I'll be gone in a week, I said over the hum of the faucet. You'll have your house, your silence, your clean narrative. She stood. You don't have to, I do. He stayed seated. I turned, drying my hands. One day you'll remember what I did for you, and what you did to me, and they'll weigh different in your hands. She laughed brittle. You act like you're the victim. I smiled faintly. I'm not acting. Then I walked out. Not forever. Just out of that room, that moment. Later that night I heard them arguing. Not loud, not angry, just tense, tight. I didn't eavesdrop. I folded my last load of laundry, packed 2 suitcases, took down every picture of us, not out of spite, out of preservation. I placed the oldest photo, the one of him in my arms as a baby, into a separate envelope, labeled it "Return if wanted." I left it on the kitchen table. The next morning I watched the sunrise from the front porch, my tea warm in my hands, the house still. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need justice. I had spoken, and they had heard. I left before they woke up. No note, no forwarding address. Just gone. The cab driver didn't ask questions when I loaded my bags into the trunk, though he did glance at the house in the rearview mirror like he knew it was a kind of leaving that couldn't be undone. I moved into a studio above a bookstore 3 towns over. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the radiator groaned like an old man with secrets. But it was mine. The first night I slept on the floor with my coat as a blanket and a lamp with no bulb. Freedom is quiet. That's the first thing I learned. No one asking what's for dinner. No footsteps in the hallway. No ghostly memories clinging to chairs and corners. Just breath. My breath. I took a job at the bookstore. Shelving mostly. Sometimes they let me work the register. I liked watching people choose stories. Parents buying books for children. Couples arguing over titles. Lonely men asking if we sold coffee even when the sign clearly said no. No one knew me there. No one called me mom. No one called me anything at all for the first few weeks. And I liked it that way. At night, I'd light a single candle and read. Sometimes poetry, sometimes crime novels. Once I picked up a book on grief, then set it down. I already knew the plot. I kept a single box of memories under the bed. Photos, baby shoes, a bracelet he made me in second grade with crooked letters that spelled strong. I didn't look at it often, but I needed to know it was there. One afternoon, I got a birthday card in the mail. No return address, no signature. Just a simple card with a sunflower on the front, the same flower on the cup she'd taken. Inside, thank you for everything. I'm sorry. I burned it. Not out of hatred, out of closure. Months passed, seasons changed. The bookstore added a poetry section. I started writing again. Little things, observations, one-liners, truths that felt too raw to say aloud. The owner asked if I'd lead a memoir workshop. I laughed. Then I said yes. People showed up, men with war stories, women who'd buried husbands, teenagers who'd survived their parents. We sat in a circle and told the truth. Not the polished truth, the kind that bleeds. One day a woman asked if I had children. I paused. I had a son. She nodded, understanding the tense. He never came looking, and I never called. That was the agreement, unspoken, but solid. Then one morning, I saw her post on social media. It came through a friend who still followed her. A photo of him as a boy on my shoulders. Caption, "Everything I am because of her." No tag, no name. Just that. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it from my mind. Instead, I printed it, framed it, set it on the windowsill. Not as a token, not as forgiveness, but as proof that I had existed, that I had loved, that I had been enough. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who carried her life in silence. But that's what it became, a story lived in the shadows, held close like a secret too sharp to share. I started walking every morning before the sun rose. There's something sacred about that hour when the world hasn't yet decided who it will be. I passed the same faces, the old man feeding pigeons, the teenage girl with purple headphones, the couple with matching windbreakers who never spoke. I liked them. They didn't ask questions. They didn't know I used to own a house, a family, a name that mattered. There was peace in anonymity. I found an old community center with a piano tucked into the corner. It was slightly out of tune, but the keys remembered music even when my fingers didn't. I started playing again, clumsy at first, then cleaner. One evening, a janitor paused, leaned against the wall, and said, "That's beautiful." I nodded, didn't speak. It had been years since anyone heard me without interrupting. Sometimes I thought about reaching out. A letter, a phone call, something. But then I'd remember the sound of her voice, the ink of his signature on that eviction notice, and the way my name, my presence had become inconvenient. One afternoon, the bookstore got a delivery of new titles. I opened a box and saw his name, not hers. His. My son. It was a book, a memoir. The cover was modest, the title quiet. I flipped to the dedication, to the woman who taught me resilience. I failed her. I remember. My hands shook. I set it down, walked into the stockroom, sat on the floor. I didn't cry, but my throat closed the way it used to when I tried to speak and they talked over me. That night I read the entire thing. He didn't mention me by name, not once. But I was there, in the corners, in the metaphors, in the rhythm of his sentences. I could see my voice in his, regret woven through every chapter. Guilt not worn like a badge, but carried like a bruise. In one passage he wrote, "There are people who save you by disappearing." I learned too late that love isn't something you outgrow. I closed the book, set it on my nightstand. I didn't write to him, didn't call, didn't send congratulations, because the act of remembering was enough. A week later, the owner asked if I'd consider giving a reading at the store. I said no. Then I changed my mind. I picked a Thursday. We rearranged chairs, lit candles, made hot cider. I didn't read from his book. I read from my journal, the one I'd started the day after I left. Pages full of small moments, the way the bookstore smelled after rain, the sound of old pages turning the silence of walking away. People cried, not loudly, just enough. Afterward, a young man approached me. He couldn't have been older than 20. His hands were shaking. "I think I'm losing my mother," he said. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then stop, turn around, find her." He nodded, and I watched him leave. I don't know if he made it, if he apologized, if she answered the door, but I like to think he tried. Autumn came early that year. The trees outside the bookstore turned faster than usual, a rush of copper and flame like they couldn't wait to be bare. I walked slower. Each leaf on the ground felt like a truth finally released. I'd found rhythm in this life. Not joy, not quite, but rhythm. I wore the same coat every day, made soup on Sundays, rode at the same table by the window. The barista at the corner cafe started remembering my order. Small things, steady things. But grief doesn't expire. It evolves. One night I dreamed I was back in the old house, except it wasn't hers anymore or his. It was mine again, filled with light. My furniture back where it belonged. The walls whispered my name. But when I reached the kitchen, they were there. Both of them, laughing, holding hands. And I was invisible again. I woke up gasping, the room too dark, too small. I sat on the floor, heart pounding, feeling like I had traveled through time and lost all over again. The next morning, I didn't go to the bookstore. I took the train 2 hours south. Just got on without thinking, like muscle memory had taken the wheel. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I got off near the old neighborhood, walked the long way, past the school where he learned to read, past the park where I used to push him on the swing until my arms ached. Then I stood across the street from the house. It was different now. New paint, new blinds, a car I didn't recognize, no toys on the lawn, no wind chimes, just a house. She was on the porch, alone, smoking. Her hair was longer. She looked tired, thin in a way that no longer seemed intentional. She didn't see me. I stood there a full minute, watched the smoke curl into the sky, watched her rub her neck like it hurt. Then I turned and walked away. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood something. They didn't win. They just lost differently. Later, back in my studio, I unpacked a scarf I hadn't worn in years. One he'd given me for Christmas when he was 11, itchy, red, terrible stitching. I wore it the next day. At the bookstore, a woman I'd seen a dozen times but never spoken to stopped me. "That color suits you," she said. I smiled. "Thank you." Then I shelved books, made tea, wrote a postcard to myself. "You survived what tried to silence you." I mailed it. It arrived 3 days later. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, next to a photo of the ocean, next to a line I'd copied from a novel. We start over every time we remember who we are. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need forgiveness. I needed this, a life that didn't ask me to vanish. Winter settled in like a hush. The bookstore's windows fogged each morning, and the radiator in my apartment finally gave up. I bought an extra blanket, learned how to warm soup on a camping stove. It was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, not painful, just constant, like a memory you can't shake. I started keeping odd hours, woke up at 4, read until dawn, walked through the sleeping town. Snow muffled everything. It made the world gentle. For the first time in years, I felt untouched. Letters began arriving from people who had attended the reading, strangers mostly. One woman wrote, "You made me feel seen in a way I didn't know I needed." Another, "My mother and I hadn't spoken in 5 years. I called her after your story. I kept everyone, tied them together with twine, held them sometimes just to remember that truth still mattered." One day I got a package, no note, no name, inside a mug, Sunflowers. My throat closed. My hands trembled. I placed it on the shelf above the sink. Didn't use it. Just looked at it now and then like you look at an old scar, not with pain but with awe. He was still out there, writing, speaking. He'd become something. I followed quietly, saw his interviews, read between the lines. He never named me. But I was there, in every pause, in every quote about strength and sacrifice. He carried the loss like I did, not loudly, but daily. Then one afternoon a young woman came into the bookstore, nervous, clutching a worn paperback. "Are you?" she asked, trailing off. I nodded gently. "Yes." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "I'm his assistant," she said. He didn't know how to reach you." I raised an eyebrow, but he found a way. She nodded. "He's doing a talk next month," he said. "If you wanted to come, he'd leave a seat. No pressure, just a seat." I didn't answer, just thanked her. She left a small card, the date, the place, nothing else. I set it on the windowsill. That night I didn't sleep. I thought about all the years, the silences, the slow deaths. And I asked myself, what would I do with that seat? Would I take it? Would I sit quietly in the back, unseen but present? Or would I stay here in the life I'd built from the ashes morning came? The sky bruised purple and gold. I boiled water, used the sunflower mug, drank slowly. No tears, no trembling, just breath. I looked at the card again. Then I tucked it into a book and shelved it under fiction. Not because the gesture wasn't real, but because I didn't need to go. I had already arrived. Spring always returns, even if you don't believe in it. That year it arrived slow shy. The trees outside the bookstore stretched their limbs cautiously like they'd been hurt before. I understood that feeling. The workshop kept growing. New faces, old grief. We shared stories the way people share food in a famine, desperately gratefully. I spoke less, listened more. There was power in witnessing. One night, a woman stayed after. She was older, fragile looking, but fierce like an ember in a storm. "My daughter won't speak to me," she said. "Told me I'm toxic, that I don't know how to love." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood the wound. "What did you do?" she asked. I smiled softly. I left before I was erased. She didn't speak after that, just squeezed my hand. There were days I missed him. Not the man he became, but the boy I raised. The way he used to fall asleep mid-sentence. The way he once asked me if thunder was God's stomach growling. But those memories weren't poisoned. They were mine. I didn't let her take those. Sometimes in the middle of shelving books, I'd whisper a line of poetry to myself, something he once loved. And in that moment, we were still connected, not by obligation, not by guilt, but by something quieter. One morning I got a letter. Real pen, real paper. No return address. Inside a single page. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't expect your voice. But I owe you this. I loved you. I forgot how. I remember now. No name. But I knew." I didn't respond. I placed the letter in the lockbox under my bed. Next to the deed. Next to the photo. Not everything needs a reply. Peace isn't always found in reunion. Sometimes it lives in the space you carve for yourself after the storm. I bought myself a necklace. Not expensive. Just simple silver. One word engraved. Still. I wore it every day. On Sundays, I walked to the edge of town where the river curled around the trees. I'd sit on the bench and listen. Birds, wind, water. Nothing loud, nothing urgent. Just presence. One Sunday, a boy passed me on a bike. Dark curls, bright eyes. He looked like him. He turned back and smiled. "Hi," he said. I smiled. "Hi." He rode on. I sat there for a long time, not waiting, just existing. Some things were never recovered. The house. The moments I wasn't given. The sound of his voice when it still called me Mom without hesitation. But other things, quieter, deeper things were reclaimed. The right to my own narrative. the dignity of silence, the sacred act of choosing myself. I'm not bitter. I don't need him to come back. I don't need her to say sorry. I don't even need the world to know what happened. I know. And I am still here, still whole even in the places where I was broken. That's enough. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if this story moved you. Share your voice. It matters.